Hi, everybody, and thank you for coming. And as Vicki said, I've been canning for a long time, and over the years I've shown lots of people how to can, but until 2 weeks ago, I never did it in a classroom setting. So I'm very amateur. Please forgive me in advance for that. And today we're going to can tomatoes, which you'll see right here, the pints of tomatoes. I'm going to let each one of you take a pint home so you can see what the finished product looks and tastes like. And we're also going to make a fresh corn salsa. So those will be the two things that we focus on today. And one of the reasons that I have so many pots and pans and things out, just so that we can do this all smoothly. Normally when I am doing a canning project, I stick with one recipe, and that's what I can that day, and when I'm done, and I put everything up and clean it. So normally to do like canned tomatoes, which will be our first recipe today because it takes a little longer in the water bath, you're really going to want your canning pan, which is this one, is the one that goes on top of the stove. It's got a rack inside of it, and it's deep enough, as you can see, because you always want to have an inch of water above the top of all your canning jars when you get it full. So normally you'll just have a canning pan. This is the electric version of that same canning pan. I think they run about $100. I got it because I can so much, and it just makes it so that I can put some of this stuff off, not have it all be on the stove. So you would have one of these or these, and then you're going to have one pan of shallow water boiling to blanch your tomatoes, because you're going to want to pull the skins off of them. So, and then there's some other little things that I'll talk about in a little bit. The clamp for the jars, a measuring tool to make sure you've got the correct headspace, and a funnel to get the food in the jar without making a big mess. So, but other than that, it's just pretty simple things that you have in your kitchen. One thing I will say, so if you look at the first recipe in your book, there's a one that's multi-pages. And we are going to work on the recipe that's called crushed tomatoes. And the thing about canning tomatoes is you make each recipe kind of in the jar. So you're really just using, you can do whole tomatoes, halved tomatoes. The USDA doesn't show a quartered tomato, but the ball recipes do. And then you're going to add citric acid to acidify the tomatoes and salt to the canning jar. So it doesn't really, you don't have to start with 22 pounds of tomatoes. You could start with 3 pounds of tomatoes and make maybe a couple of jars just to get the hang of it. So one of the things, may seem weird to add lemon juice to canned tomatoes, but the whole thing about us at home being able to create a shelf-stable, safe product is that you have to have the proper acid level inside the jar. So we're going to be boiling it at boiling water temperatures, but you have to have enough acid. And weirdly, tomatoes are not that, they're almost in the middle of the pH scale. They're right at the border of what is safe to can, which is typically fruits, and what is not that safe to can, like green beans or okra or whatever. So we always add tomato juice or vinegar to make them safe to be shelf stable. So I did get myself a little head start because I know we're gonna, last time we were kind of pressing right up at the 2-hour limit, but basically you're gonna wanna start, I'm using 5 pounds of tomatoes. A lot of recipes will say about 22, like this many medium tomatoes or whatever. It is helpful to have a home scale, but if you do not have a home scale, you could always say, okay, I think I'm going to do 5 pounds of tomatoes. I'm at the farmer's market, and you weigh out your 5 pounds of tomatoes and put them in a separate bag from the other things that you buy. Or you can go with the estimates, because while there is some important science here, it's not completely an exact science. So you can use your recipe to guide you. I noticed that my 5 pounds was just over the top of my 4-quart containers on each of these recipes. So Then has everybody blanched tomatoes before? Has anybody? You have? Okay. Oh, great. Okay. So I'm going to use one of these because I blanched all the ones that I have. All you're going to do is drop it into boiling water. You can do a whole pan if you like, just for 30 seconds to a minute until you like make that skin easy to slip off. So we're just going to leave that in here. Then what I often do is put the tomatoes then in some cool water so that they're hot and cool enough to handle when I get ready to peel them. Pull this one out. So then the process now is just to take out the little core, which you can either do, you know, this will give you the most tomato left over is if you go in kind of diagonal around the core. And then all you do is just slip the skin off. Now, this tomato you can see, I think you can see, has a imperfection on it. You don't want to can any bad spots. You want to cut those out. A lot of times people do tomato seconds for canning tomatoes because they want their pretty ones for the salad and all of that. But do make sure you don't want to can any bacteria. And so make sure you cut anything out. This was another tomato I saved because it has a big boo-boo on it. And see, once I get it down to good, I can use what's left. And sometimes you just have to throw the tomato away. Oh, I'm gonna have to peel some of that. One thing I did not start with is you do want to start with clean hands and all clean equipment because you want to keep the whole, see, I've got another one with some bacteria, some spoilage, but you want to keep everything super, super clean because you do not want to introduce any bacteria into the canning process. So again, all I'm doing is peeling these skins off, and then I'm doing a little tomato quarter. And I'm almost at the point where we're done. So, is there anybody that wants to be a little cooking assistant? Do you? Come down, Shirley. If you want to just wash your hands, I only have that dish soap, but I'm gonna get your hands clean anyway. Yeah. And again, the thing I like about canning tomatoes is you can do 30 quarts if you want, or you can do 5 pints if you want. Whatever you've got time for, because you're making each recipe in the jar. Okay, so it's just these last few tomatoes are ready to go. And then just pop them in here. And I'm gonna empty that. So the other thing that you're going to want to do is, again, before you start, and we did it before you guys came into class, you're going to want to clean your jars. Now, another thing is the jars and the rings are all reusable. They only say like don't use the jar if it ever gets chipped or cracked or anything like that, especially like around the rim. And as your rings get rusty or corroded, you probably want to replace them too. You can actually, in my experience, the jars last way longer than the rings do, but you can buy little packages of rings and lids or just lids, because the lids for canning are one-time use only. So you can only can once with them. And what I always mark my lids, but also when I open, if you can properly, you can pick the jar up by the lid and then the lid won't come off. So I usually use my church key to open it. So once I've got that little dimple in the lid, I know I can still use it to, put leftovers in or something in the refrigerator, but I will never can with that lid again. So that's a really important thing to know about these. So you want to get all of this, the jars and everything washed up. Another thing that has anybody canned before, done water bath canning? Okay, so you probably remember that we always used to boil these little lids. And actually, everything that I noticed on Facebook has been saying do not boil them anymore. And ball instructions actually say just wash them in warm soapy water. And but I did go back to the ball website, and they say don't boil them, but you can simmer them at 180 degrees. You know, just put them at a simmer, but it is no longer necessary to simmer them. You can just wash them with soap and water. So almost every canning kit comes with all these nice little things, including this little magnet that will help you to pick up the rings and the lids out of the boiling water. But I found that now I don't use these anymore because I just hand wash these. So, but anyway, if you do choose to simmer, just never do a hard boil. This is a little bit of rubber, and if it gets too broken down as you're getting ready to can, then it's going to be too broken down to form a seal on your jar. So, how you doing, Shirley?
Good. I got one, this one and one more.
Okay, so once you've got your jars clean, and you can dishwash them, you can hand wash them, however you want to do it. But once you've got them clean, you want to get them super hot. So obviously we're working with tempered glass here, so you do not want to put a bunch of hot tomatoes into a cold jar. And that's what we're going to do next here is just quickly, I need to get the water dumped. We're going to cook these tomatoes. If you look at that crushed tomato recipe, we're going to briefly cook these tomatoes and get them hot all the way through, and then we're going to ladle them into the hot jars and then put them into the boiling hot water bath and process them. So I think that recipe says something to the effect of take 1/6 of the tomatoes that you just, is that what it says? And throw them in the pot first, like a small portion. 1/6? Yes, okay. So we're going to take, I kind of eyeball, to be honest, but whoops, thank you. But we're going to take about, again, a little over 10% of these tomatoes and just put them, that's it.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, there's one more in there. There's one more. So I'm just going to kind of crush these tomatoes a bit in the pan and get them heated. And what this does apparently is helps, a lot of times your canned fruit or vegetables will float to the top in a canning process. So you got all these beautiful cans lined up and there's water at the bottom and all your vegetables are up at the top. Mm-hmm. So what they're having you do here is essentially it breaks down some enzyme in the tomatoes when you start out like by crushing some of these, and then you throw the rest of your tomatoes in that kind of brothy tomato mix, and it keeps it from breaking down in the jar later. And there's nothing wrong with it breaking down in the jar. It's just not as pretty as when you have a nice homogeneous jar filled with tomatoes. So does anybody want to come and look at these? Or actually, I'll just show you the pot in a minute here. Get this going a little bit. These are super firm tomatoes, so they're not getting super crushed, but they are creating a little broth. And I'm going to let them go just another, minute. So that's what it looks like. And again, we're just kind of seasoning the pot almost before we add the rest of our tomatoes. So, and then I believe once you add the rest of the tomatoes, you go for 10 minutes, right? I'll probably need my first timer. For 5 minutes, okay. Okay, so now we've got this whole You bring it to a boil and then simmer for 5 minutes, right? Okay. I'm just got to bring it to a boil here. And once you've got a little bit of this tomato juice already going, it does help it not to scorch. But you do want to keep an eye on it because you're having a tomato product that you're going to bring to a boil, so not too high of heat.
Did you want that tomato in there, or did it go with that batch? The one that you showed?
Oh, it went with that batch.
Okay.
Thank you. You're keeping track of everything here. You're a good assistant, Shirley. So next, we're gonna just need to let this go and get the. So right now, all we have is tomatoes in their own juice, but it is getting a little juicier as the tomatoes are heating up. And then in a minute, we're gonna start getting out some jars, and I've got 5 jars boiling in the electric water bath. So we'll get those out, and then we're gonna add the salt and the lemon juice. One thing that every single recipe that I've ever read says is to use bottled lemon juice rather than fresh. So I use bottled lemon juice rather than fresh. And you'll also notice some recipes call for vinegar as the acid, and it will almost always specify that your vinegar is 5% acidity. So, and I just noticed today, I was buying some apple cider vinegar, and some of it said 5% and some of it said 4%. So you, again, they want to make sure that you're getting the appropriate amount of acid in there. So who's going to time for me?
Me.
Oh, okay. Do you want to set it for 5 minutes?
I've got it set. I'm just waiting on it to boil.
Oh, it just, well, I guess it was really just simmering on the edge, so I'm rushing it.
Yes, you are. It's okay.
So I believe that is all in a chart in your materials. How much salt and how much, let's see.
Okay.
Does it tell you how much salt and how much?
Yes. On the first page.
Okay.
down here.
I think it's 2 tablespoons. Okay, a pint is 1 tablespoon of bottled lemon juice, or you can use citric acid, or you can use vinegar with 5% acidity.
Does it matter what type of vinegar?
No, in fact, all the vinegars will give it slightly different flavors, so that might be something that you'd want to play with. I have always done tomatoes with lemon juice because I just find like the lemon just sort of goes with the tomato. But you can think of all the applications where vinegar would make sense too. So if they specify like white vinegar or white wine vinegar, I would stick with, but they're pretty interchangeable as long as they're 5% acidity. Then we also are going to need to add some, well, optionally, you can add salt. I always do. And where does the salt? These USDA recipes are, you've got to track through so many pages.
It's true. It's true. It said that
One
it was.
teaspoon.
1 teaspoon of salt or a ½ teaspoon per pint. And so we're canning in pints today. So we're going to put 1 tablespoon of lemon juice in the bottom of each jar, and we're going to put a ½ teaspoon of salt in the bottom of each jar. So, and again, we're making our recipe in the jar, so that's why you can just use as many tomatoes as you want, or, because every recipe is going to happen in the jar. Are we there yet?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
I'm sick.
perfect. Okay, so now I'm going to demonstrate some of these handy dandy. Did you just hit it?
Yeah.
Okay.
We got
Okay.
about 4 minutes.
Okay, perfect. While we're doing this, so I've had these pint jars kind of simmering in here since we started, and this is where this tool, I don't know of anything else that would really replace this very well, because it grabs the glass and you can dump it, and you don't have to put your hand near the boiling water. They do always say too, when you use these, always grab the glass jar. Once we have the lids on, it may be tempting to do the lid, but if you bend that lid, you may render it unsafe for canning. So you always want to use the clamps on the actual glass. Just yesterday, I dropped a jar of salsa on the ground, and fortunately it didn't break, but it bent the lid. It bent both the little single-use lid and the ring. So I opened it up and put it in the refrigerator. Okay. So ½ teaspoon of salt. I'm just using kosher salt here, but I don't think there's any real, you could use sea salt, or I'm going to put it in here so it's easy to scoop out. So just ½ teaspoon. And again, the salt is optional. I like salt, so I always put it in, but you don't have to put it in if you're on a low salt diet. It does not matter if it's iodized or not. Okay, got one in all those. And the lemon juice, thank you. So this is 1 tablespoon in each jar. One. And again, I've used organic lemon and lime juice. I've used real lemon and real lime. But the only thing that I've ever seen specified on an approved recipe is that it be bottled. And I just think it's probably because it's more consistently acidized than fresh fruit would be. So, okay. So now, is it ringing? Okay. Perfect. So now we've got still hot jars. So again, I don't pull them out and start doing this until we're just in the last few minutes. And so we've got hot jars, and we've got some nice hot boiling tomatoes. I'm going to put the tomatoes. Let's see. Will you move this, Shirley, over here so we can, hopefully everybody can see everything. Okay, and again, the funnel to me is so critical because you want to keep we are going to wipe off our jars, but you want to keep your jars as clean as possible. So the funnel is really important. And then another thing, you can just use a soup ladle. At some point I picked up one of these and I really like it because it's really easy to aim into the jar. Now, when you read through the recipe, one of the things that is really critical about any canning recipe is something called headspace. And it's how much space you leave at the top of the jar between the food, the liquid, and then the lid. And I'm just throwing things in here now to get an idea of how many jars I'm actually going to fill today. But I believe your recipe says a ½ headspace. Will somebody it does? Okay. So a lot of times when I'm writing down my own recipes that I want to keep and stuff, or copying them down, I'm not saying I don't create my own recipes, but those are the things I note is how long the processing time is, because that's critical, and also what the headspace is. So, and the reason for headspace, I don't understand all the science around it, but you're trying to create a vacuum inside the jar. And you're not even, so the hot boiling water boils some of the air. You'll even see that they kind of bubble as you're putting them in the jar. It boils some of the air out of the canning jar, and then it allows the jar, that one-time use lid, to do a vacuum seal. So if you sometimes, for instance, we may end up with a partial jar here. Those are the ones that I just either freeze or stick in the refrigerator, because if you have a half a jar, you won't be able to achieve that vacuum seal. So you won't have safely canned. And it looks to me like we're gonna comfortably get 4 pints here, but we're not gonna get this 5th pint. So I'm only out a half teaspoon of salt and a tablespoon of lemon juice, but let's leave that off to the side. Now, I'm gonna put a little bit more in here. Okay, I'm gonna put this over here. Ooh, that's hot. A little too hot to handle. So again, let me show you first. So this little doodad is something that we use to, you go in like 4 sides of the jar. Let me see if I can do this where you can see better. I've painted myself into a corner here. So you're gonna, and the reason it's plastic is because you probably don't want to get, you can use a butter knife or something, but metal in this hot jar might prevent crack, you know, make a, for it crack or something like that, which you don't want. So I always use plastic. But the other side of this is a headspace measure. So each one of these little stair steps is a 1/4 inch. And for instance, a lot of the jellies that I make call for a 1/4 inch of headspace. So I make sure that it goes up to the bottom of that first step. This one is a 1/2 inch, so you want to make sure that it's going up to the bottom of the second step. And you can see it's not. So I'm going to add tomato juice until I get, nope, that one's still going, so we're good. I'm going to add tomato juice until I get up to that. Okay, now I'm going to check again and see if I'm at 1/2 inch headspace yet. That one's close, but still a little light. Oh, they're all light. I might end up with,
And if that would happen, what would you do? Pour that and then,
if on this one, if I was short just like a tablespoon of water,
yeah,
there wouldn't be any harm
In
in
having-
throwing a tablespoon of boiling water in this pan.
okay.
That one is still a little short, isn't it?
Yep.
So let's just put a little hot water in here.
Okay.
Raw packed tomatoes actually use water, hot water. You put them over the top of the tomatoes. So you actually, you know, when Shirley was cutting them, we blanched them and we cut them, and then you just pile the raw tomatoes into a hot jar, and then you pour boiling water over the top of them, which is the reason that I'm okay with adding water to this recipe. So, because that is a normal way to do it. Let's get the lids on the rest of these. Shirley, do you want to grab 4 lids and 4 rings for me? So I'm just taking now a clean paper towel and just making sure, so you don't want any food between the jar and the lid, the one-time use lid. I'm going to add some water to that one. So these have been washed, but not simmered or boiled. So you put the lid on and it just fits very nicely. And then crank this, and there's a thing called fingertip tight. So because you're wanting to create some vacuum, you have to let some air escape from the jar. So you can't just crank this down super hard. They say fingertip tight. So you just kind of get it to where it goes. And oftentimes when you finish canning, you'll be amazed because the lids will all be loose. When you can finally handle them again, they'll all be a little bit loose. But it's because they never were that tight, and it allowed air to come in and out. At first, it always freaked me out when Okay, I'm gonna go fingertip tight, boom, which is not very tight. Thank you. Ah, sometimes it takes a minute to get them on. Okay, fingertip tight.
Oh, our water flowed away.
Is it all gone?
You might have enough. Maybe.
Yep, it'll be enough.
Okay. All right.
Okay, I'm gonna stick this over here. Okay, thank you, Shirley.
Yes.
Whew, that's hot. Fingertip tight.
That's hot.
Okay, so now, boy, I'm getting really overwhelmed with stuff here. I move this. So we're just going to use, this is like a basic, what is about $12? $20? It's a very inexpensive little canning pan. That's okay. You can, yeah, you can find them at True Value or Ace Hardware. But again, you can just use the pan you've got at home as long as you've got enough height. Or sometimes, you know those Dutch ovens that come with every single pan set you buy? Like when I'm doing my jelly in little short jars, sometimes I just do them in my Dutch oven. But one thing you want to do, again, because we're working with glass, is you don't want to have anything right at the bottom of the pan next to the, that might need some water added to it, next to the burner because it could crack the glass. So all of these come with, let's see if I can get a, and again, some of them in my own pans, I added something extra. Added a rack, but these little canning pans come with a nice little, isn't that just, I've never even used one of these, but so it's a whole rack that keeps the jars off the bottom of the pan, and then it's got this other wonderful little feature where you can hang it here and put your cans in the easy way, your jars in the easy way. So again, remember that I'm down on the jar, not on my aluminum lid. So I'm just going to place these hot jars with hot tomatoes in them. Whoops, better. We're going to have to wait until the water starts boiling, and the crushed tomatoes, does it say 35 minutes or 40? I think that one is the chart on the back. Says 35? Okay, so a very important thing that you need to know whenever you're water bath canning is that whenever they talk about how long you should process something in boiling water, they're talking about at sea level. So as you go up in altitude, the boiling temperature of water lowers, so you have to boil it for a little bit longer to achieve the same amount of heat through. So Salina, Kansas, as long as you're canning in Salina, Kansas, is at 1,200 feet above sea level. So to every water bath canning recipe, no matter how small of a jar or if you're using quarter pints or quarts, you're going to add 5 minutes. So you would go to 40 on this. So 40 from the time the water boils. Oh, and I'm going to add just a little smidge more, but you want the water to be deep enough to cover your pans.
It's bubbling away.
See that it's bubbling because some of the air is coming out of those jars. That's why we didn't go too tight. We need to so I'm just adding a little more hot water here because you always want to have your jars have at least an inch of water over the top. If it's just level, it won't be right. Okay, so we'll leave this like here, and I'll just leave you in charge of
Okay.
making sure when that goes to time, we're gonna do 40 minutes. Okay, how are we on time? Oh, we've only been 40 minutes?
Yeah.
Perfect, okay.
Time flies by when you're having fun.
So that was a whole complete recipe. So in the end, we're gonna end up with 4 pints of canned tomatoes. We started with 5 pounds of tomatoes that did have some icky spots that we had to cut out. So I think that's why we ended up a little bit short. But, and when we're done with these, just to go through the recipe, you're gonna put them, and I always use a towel, because again, you don't wanna burn through linoleum, and,
You turn the front one off.
oh, I didn't mean to do that.
I didn't think you
thank you.
would be sitting here.
I need an assistant up here. So I always use a towel because just again, you don't want to knock that glass against a hard surface and have it break because it's all under a lot of pressure at that moment. So, but when you take the cans out of the water, and we'll go back over this when we take them out of the water, you will want to use that tong, get below the ring onto the glass, pull them straight out. Don't tilt, there'll be water kind of left on the lid, ignore it, and just put them down one by one on the towel. And then you're gonna wanna leave them 12 hours undisturbed. So during that 12 hours, and mostly like with jam, it just happens in seconds after you take them out, but you'll start out, and let me grab one of these rings so you can see it. Can you see how there's a slight elevation? There's like a little circle in the middle that's, can you see that? Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. Can you see that little bump in the middle of the lid? Can you guys see that? I don't want to go right to the camera. So yeah. So sometimes it'll happen in the canner, and sometimes it'll happen outside of the camera, out of the canner. Sometimes it makes a big, nice ping. Sometimes it makes no noise at all. But when you get a vacuum seal, that thing will suck down and it'll all be level and almost concave. So, and 12 hours after you finish canning, if it still has this click to it, it didn't seal. And you should stick it in the refrigerator and eat it that way. So you can also reprocess, and I would suggest if you do, you get online and look at how to reprocess it. Like if you had a whole bunch of them that didn't seal, you might want to reprocess. I've reprocessed jam before because it didn't seal, but if I just have one can, I stick it in the refrigerator and say, okay, we're eating that this week. So, but that's the important stuff is you want to just pull it straight out. And if you want to, you can take a little paper towel and just sort of, touch it to the top to get that excess water off. But you're going to want to make sure that all of these are down to know that everything cans safely. So that was canning tomatoes. Now we're going to start on a second recipe. Okay, so the corn tomato salsa is what I'm choosing to make today. One thing, I want to do a little side note here. On the very back of your paper, it's probably this sheet right here. This is a little sheet that I created for good resources for canning recipes and tips. So if you get online, you get on YouTube, you get on Facebook, there's all kinds of people canning crazy stuff that's not really safe to can. For instance, like you're never supposed to can anything with dairy in it. You should never can anything with flour in it. There's just a lot of, but people do, and if they're can seal, they get excited about it and they think it's all safe. I have some brothers that they just put the hot tomatoes in the hot jar and they put a lid on it and they don't do the water bath, but the thing will still vacuum seal, so they call it good and safe. I do not, and I try not to ever eat their food that they've canned. So what I wanted to do, because sorting through all the good recipes and the not very safe ones can be difficult, so I wanted to give you some good resources. I trust that NCH, the National Canning Home Center, it's a federal site that has, and the link is in there, they have all approved, tested recipes. So they've been vigorously tested to make sure that they are correct. I also love the Ball website, ballmasonjars.com. They have lots of recipes on there. I always feel really good about Ball recipes. I named a couple of other ones. I'm beginning to, wait, I'll talk about the research and extension offices. Many universities and many of the states also have extension offices. So if you see a recipe, I mean, K-State has one, and I think I put the link in there. But if you see a recipe that is approved by a state extension or a university extension office, feel good about it. And finally, I wrote down this healthy canning website, because that website uses all approved recipes. And sometimes they make, I find that website to be very educational, because it explains some of the things that other sites assume you know. So, and I will tell you, like, for instance, in your packet, your multi-page packet, you'll see that tomatoes have to, if you raw pack tomatoes, it says 85 minutes for pints and 90 minutes for quarts after a raw pack, in which I found really surprising, because I use a Ball recipe and it says 35 minutes for pints and 40 for quarts. So sometimes the experts will agree.
Just 1 minute. This is boiling now. Do I put the lid down?
Yes, now put the lid
And do
down,
I turn
and we can turn it down a little bit, but you,
so-
yeah, just a little bit, because we want it. So that's another, but so even the Ball tested these recipes at 35 and 40 minutes, and the state extension offices tested them at 85 and 90. But I trust Ball, so I do it with the Ball recipe way. But I wouldn't, somebody that said, hey, just put the hot stuff in the hot jar and vacuum seal it, I don't trust, because that's not a reputable necessarily source. So the other thing I wanted to say about the canning, she started the timer now on for 40 minutes, because it was 35 and we're adding 5. You want to make sure that it boils the entire 40 minutes. If it stops boiling, you have to restart your timer. So what I've noticed is that on the stovetop, it's pretty forgiving. My little Ball electric canner is, man, it just, like, if you take it off full boil, it stops boiling immediately. And so I never change the setting on it, because if it stops boiling, you got to restart. So, okay, so let's do the,
Waiting for this
good,
to
perfect.
boil.
Okay, so let's pull that recipe out, the corn and tomato salsa. So this, I just find this to be a really fun recipe. There's tons of salsa recipes out on all these websites, but I just love the idea of putting corn in mine. So this one actually calls for cherry tomatoes, but I have researched, and any kind of tomato can be substituted for any other kind of tomato. So that's something that's good to know. Also, any kind of pepper can be substituted for any other kind of pepper. So if you want more heat or less heat, maybe you want to put a little bit of bell pepper in here instead of jalapeno, or you want to put habanero to make it hotter. Peppers are also substitutable. So we're going to start out with our 5 pounds of tomatoes, and then we're going to do 2 cups of corn kernels. And I actually, the last time I did this, I just bought a frozen bag from the grocery store and thawed them, and we used 2 cups from there. This time, the sweet corn was beckoning me at the grocery store, and I thought, oh, let's just use fresh. So I'll show you how we do that. And then a cup of red onion, 2 jalapeno peppers, They had some optional chipotle chili powder, and I like the bright tomato, corn, lime flavor of this recipe, so I don't choose to add it, but you certainly could. And also those dried spices are pretty interchangeable too. So if there was something else that you were excited about, you could put that in there. So, and then a half cup of chopped fresh cilantro. So before you all got here, I did the jalapeno peppers and I did one of the corn cobs, but I didn't know if ever have you all taken corn off a cob? I just thought I'd show you in case there was any question about how to do that. Can you see me over here? Okay. Corn is going to go everywhere, but this is the corn cob that I already stripped. And all I do is just kind of take a knife down the side.
Can I give you a suggestion?
You have a suggestion?
I do.
I should have done it in that thing, first of all.
If you take 2 bowls, you turn the smaller one upside down inside and set that corn up on it, it'll fall into the bowl.
Oh, well, that's a nice idea. Okay, I'm just going to do a little bit of this because we almost got, these are such huge corn cobs that we almost got 2 cups out of the first corn. Okay. So I've got my 2 cups of corn right here. I've got my jalapeno peppers that I chopped right here. It calls for a cup of onion, which I've been using this handy dandy little food chopper that I love so much. And I just peeled the onion. Well, it needs to be a little bit smaller. And then you just go. Yeah, but you could also just use your knife to cut this. So I'm kind of a gadget queen, I confess. Gadget junkie. This thing also has a little nice element where it shows you your measurements on the side. So I'm just barely short of 1 cup. Okay, I'm gonna do one more little. Done. Okay, so we've got these. Now we need a half a cup of cilantro chopped. And I forgot to bring a scissors. I oftentimes just rinse these and then cut it with my kitchen scissors. But I'm just gonna do a little knife chop here and get a half cup of cilantro. Now, let me tell you something. Some people love cilantro and some people hate it. You can, on an approved recipe, you can leave these kind of, not the acid ingredients. You can't leave the lime juice out. You could substitute the lime juice for an equivalent of, for an amount of vinegar, but you can't leave it out. But you can leave out your non-acid ingredients and just skip it. So you don't have to put cilantro in there. Just don't substitute with anything because you don't know what the pH of what you're substituting is. The other thing that sometimes people get frustrated by not every recipe under the sun has been tested for canning. But one thing that I tell people is you can always can your basic recipe and then add stuff to it when you get it out. So like we're gonna serve the salsa today with some chips so that you can taste it, but you could feel completely free to add a can of black beans to the salsa, add some fresh avocado, add some fresh jalapeno if you want more kick to it, add some fresh squeezed lime juice. You're really creating kind of basic recipes that you can, and then when you get them out of the can, you can really enhance them if you choose to do so. So let me get my half cup measuring cup.
Smell that cilantro from here.
Do you like cilantro?
Yes, I like it.
I used to hate cilantro, and somewhere along the way, it just like grew on me. But I've heard some people are genetically programmed to think it tastes like soap.
Yep.
You're one of the, oh, you won't like it then.
And I'm like, no.
The final recipe, I feel like, doesn't come out super cilantro-y, but you can be the judge of that because we'll be serving it. So here's our half cup of cilantro. And what else do we have? A half cup of lime juice?
Yes,
And is that the only other thing besides the tomatoes and the chipotle pepper?
yes.
Yep, okay. Last time I almost forgot to put the lime juice in at the end, and I'm. So how are we doing? Are we ready to blanch?
Not, well,
Oh yeah, I think we could blanch.
okay.
So again, we're just gonna pop all these into the,
Do I need to fix cold water or?
yeah, why don't you get us a fresher? That probably all got warmed up. And again, we're really just looking for 30 seconds to a minute. Just, you don't want to, if you go too long, you're going to start cooking the tomato and you'll lose a lot of the, I mean, you can always pour the juice in, but you're just getting a lot of cooked tomato juice rather than,
This here.
you want to do it there? Well, you'll probably run out of room.
Oh, I was just to get them out.
Now these are actually chopped tomatoes, so we're going to go with a little more chopped to them than,
Then,
yeah, or even, you could even get them a little
okay. Depending on the
smaller, but
size.
yeah. They break down a little bit as they're cooking, but they're not going to be, they're not going to go from whole to chop. So, okay. Yeah, you can take them out with that, or I do have somewhere around here I have my tools.
Where'd it go?
Well, this is kind of embarrassing. I've lost the tongs.
That's all right.
I think you could probably take them
I'll
out.
fill 'em with this.
Get rid of some of these things.
Trying to get out of there.
Yeah, some of them are ready to go. I'll get the other knife. There it is. Okay, so once again, we're going to do our blanch and peel. And this time we're going to roughly chop the tomatoes as opposed to quartering or halving them. When you're using nice, bright, summertime, ripe tomatoes, this is a super juicy salsa. And I found maybe too juicy, so I usually pull it out of the jar with a slotted spoon and drain some of that liquid off, which you could actually enjoy, like in a chili or some other kind of a spicy soup. If you wanted to save it, I honestly just usually throw the kind of excess juice off, and
Sorry.
you're good.
Just splash you.
So we're just doing like a chunky dice here. Does anybody want to just experience the blanch process, or does everybody feel really good about it's pretty easy? Now this is a recipe that we're going to build in the pan, not like the tomatoes we just did in the jar. So we need to be pretty faithful to the recipe, because we want to make sure that the entire batch has the proper pH level so that we can safely can it. So again, we're going to use the amount of tomatoes that I weighed the tomatoes. We're going to use the amount of tomatoes that they called for. We're using the amount of other spices that we called for. And the things that are optional is You can leave out the cilantro or the red onions. Onions are also mostly interchangeable too, by the way. But you could leave them out, but you wouldn't add something back in. And same with the cilantro. And the tomatoes you could, again, we're using bigger tomatoes, not cherry. But you want to keep your proportions the same, etc. Now, the other thing that you'll notice, like that recipe calls for 2 jalapenos. Well, jalapenos can be like this big, or they can be like this big. So I like my jalapenos with a little kick. So if I can my salsa with a little kick. So if I can only find jalapenos that are this big, I might use 2 of them to make a regular size jalapeno. The other thing that I would say is, again, like, I don't know, have any of you, if you buy jalapenos from the store, sometimes they're like super peppery and then sometimes they're practically like bell peppers.
Yeah.
And it's like the first time I ever canned this salsa, my peppers were like bell peppers. My jalapenos were not hot at all. And I was so disappointed. But again, you open the can, you add some cayenne pepper, you add some Tabasco sauce. What I do is just put fresh jalapenos on top of my salsa, just mixed them in so that it had the same amount of kick that I like. So see what I'm, just kind of a big rough chop. That's all of them, Shirley? All right. So now, would you mind washing that pan with soap? Because we are going to use that as our cooking pan for the salsa. There. Now, if you wanted to, you could always cut this recipe in half, or you can double it, but you just don't want to, you just need to keep all the proportions the same. So if you decided to go 2.5 pounds of tomatoes, then you go to a 1/4 cup cilantro, a 1/2 cup of onion, etc. Because you want to be true to the recipe proportions. When they're perfect, they just like almost just squeeze out of the skin. There it is.
I have a question about doing this one with cherry tomatoes. Because they're so, well, sometimes they're so little, but wouldn't it be fussier to have to get peels off of walnuts?
So that ball recipe does not call for the tomatoes to be blanched.
Oh.
And I don't use cherry tomatoes because I would never want to blanch cherry tomatoes, and I just personally don't prefer the skin in there. But that recipe, you don't have to take the skin off. So you wouldn't even have to go through that whole step that Shirley just did. Oops, I threw my skins in there.
Oh, no.
But again, through my research, I know that you can substitute tomatoes, any kind of tomatoes for any kind of tomatoes, but I'm just choosing to take the skin off because I don't like skins.
I see at a lot of salsas that have a little rolled up tiny skins in it. And they are a different texture.
Yeah.
Doesn't fit as well.
There's a lot of people, like in Facebook groups and stuff, that don't love the idea. If you go online, like there's actually a ball canning community on Facebook where there's actually kind of some mean people on it, in my opinion. They lecture the rest of us. But, and they're always saying, you cannot can tomatoes with their skins on. But then there's all these approved recipes where the tomatoes have their skins on. So I'm just always like, okay, whatever. Thanks for letting us know.
Yep.
Yes.
It's not worth the argument.
Oh, and we've got to get some more jars. I'm going to let you do this for a second. And I'm going to put so again, I've got my jars clean. but I need to get them hot now. So that's a very, and normally if I'm just working on one recipe at a time, I'm just gonna have put my jars in the water bath canner while it's heating up and get them all nice and warm too. Then I'm going to empty them out and then I'm going to put them back in full. But we have a lot of different things going on because we're canning more than one recipe. So this water has been over here patiently boiling away, and we're going to add our already clean jars. So that we can get them hot. This one I have kind of rigged up a little rack in it because I did the one that came with it. It seems like when I do jam and jelly, they're usually in small jars, and it's always a little rickety. But this one looks like this, and it has a big tendency to float when it doesn't have any jars in it. So, but I like it because the jars are stable on it. So I'm just dropping these in, make sure that they go completely underneath the water. And you don't need to boil the jars, like do a big crazy boil. You just, yeah, you're just getting them hot. Let's see, let me use this to.
Question about that equipment. That's not a pressure canner.
No, it is not.
It's just a hot water bath canner.
Yes, and really the only advantage that this gives you over this is that you can take it away from your stove. Sometimes I just feel like I have so many things on my stove percolating away, and you can get it off your stove. But it is not a pressure canner. There are stovetop pressure canners, like American Canner is one of them. There is also now getting to be a growing number of electric pressure canners, but they are a whole different animal from the water bath world. Pressure canners, has anybody ever pressure canned? I'm kind of just getting started on it. I'm having a hard time with this. I'm kind of just getting started on it. Pressure canning allows you can can meat, you could can fish, you can can green beans, potatoes, squash, all your low acid foods. And the reason you cook under pressure, because you can get the temperature up to like 240 degrees Fahrenheit. And those higher temperatures that you just, obviously boiling water, you can only get to 212. You can never get it higher than 212. But when you can, with a pressure canner, those higher temperatures kill off the botulism spores and all of that kind of thing that a water bath canner cannot do. So you have a lot of flexibility. I will say, like, I canned chicken breasts one time, boneless, skinless chicken breasts. I did a raw pack, and by the time you had to put them like 85 minutes or something for a quart or a pint, and by the time I got them out of the canner, have you ever had like Swanson's canned chicken or something? It's kind of dry, and that's how it tasted. I was like, okay, didn't love that, and I can buy that at the grocery store, so, but I am going to experiment with a slightly fattier meat to see if I can get more. I mean, I think even a thigh would be a better thing to can than a chicken breast. Some people can fish, and to me, that seems like it would be kind of weird, kind of dry. Yeah, I don't know if I want to cook. I'm having a hard time with my rack here. I'm going to need to take a couple things out of it and push it down. How are you doing over there?
I got 2 more tomatoes.
Okay.
Start putting stuff in the pot.
This is my rack caught on the little spigot that goes with this outside spigot, which is another nice thing, is you can set this up right by your sink and then just drain most of the hot water out of it. But unfortunately, my rack that I rigged up just caught on it, and so it's not going to give me the height I want in my water. So I'm going to fix it. So another thing that I would say, as we're talking about all of this, is I probably wouldn't add things to a canner that's already going, mostly because you probably won't be able to maintain that boil that's required. So if I'm doing multiple batches, I usually do them one after the other instead of trying to piggyback one on the other. I'm going to add a little bit of water to my canner over here because it doesn't feel like it's going to cover my pint jars by an inch. And it's okay to put your canning jars in, realize that you don't have coverage by an inch, add some water and just leave them in there, and then when the water starts boiling, that's when your timer starts. So it's not usually a problem that oh, I put my jars in too soon, you know. So now I feel good about this. Again, I always keep everything lidded because that brings it to a boil faster. Okay, so I'm going to start while you're doing that.
Okay.
We're going to dump all these ingredients. I've got my fresh corn that I took off the cob, 2 cups worth, and a few of those little silk strings too. Got my fresh jalapenos that I cut. Okay, I got my ½ cup of lime juice. ½ cup of cilantro's already in there. And 1 cup of the red onion. Put this over in the sink. I gave you all the hard work and I'm doing all the easy stuff.
Fine.
It's kind of nice having somebody else cut the tomatoes.
Sous chef.
You are.
Be your sous
How are we doing on time over? Oh, Shirley, you're the timer, aren't you?
chef. Yeah, well, it should tell you.
8:52. Okay, so we're down to a little over 8 minutes for the pints of tomatoes. And then as we get this going, I'll open up. Let me talk to you a little bit about labeling. So when I do tomatoes for friends or for giveaway or whatever, or any kind of canned foods, I like to put labels on them just because they kind of give that pretty. So this is my corn salsa label. I just use those Avery labels and stick them in the printer and design them. This is my peach jam that I made from the peaches off our peach tree this year. These are just I don't usually give away canned tomatoes, so I don't usually put a label on them. But today I'm giving each one of you one of these, so I put a little Local Garden Tomatoes label on it. But one thing you always want to do once the cans are fully cooled down and all of that, and again, you can see how there's no bump up there. It's all nice and concave. See, can you see that okay? One thing you always want to do is add your date. So Ball guarantees, and most of the major can companies guarantee that they guarantee properly canned food will remain fresh on the shelf for 18 months. So that's a year and a half. So I always make, but there are many foods that last longer than 18 months. I have some tomato juice in my cabinet right now that is right now hitting 2 years old. It still looks beautiful. It smells good when I take it out. It's just, that's what Ball guarantees. If you can it properly, it'll last for 18 months. I'll show you another thing a lot of canners recommend, although I don't do it. Remember I talked to you about if it's properly canned, you'll be able to pick it up from this single lid. A lot of people actually take this ring off and they just store it this way. Because if you're canning lots of food, that'll be a really easy way to identify that your seal got lost. Something happened. So if all of a sudden your lid is off, you'll know it's not being held on by this. So they even say like, don't stack your cans, don't leave the lid on. But I leave the lid on because I think it's prettier. But I always do this test when I get a can out. I make sure that the only way I'm going to get it off is with the church key. So I always date them. And if there's any question about what kind of food it is, I also write corn tomato salsa. In this case, it's pretty obvious to me from what I can that this is my corn tomato salsa. So all I did with the date was a date. So this is just like my home use kind of stuff. If I want to make it gifts, you know, you can tie ribbons around them or put them in baggies or whatever, but I usually make them a little prettier.
We ready to dump these?
Okay, let's dump. Let's go. And then I think you said bring it to a boil and go 5 to 10 minutes, right? Okay, so let's bring this to a boil. Ooh, let's use some of that juice, yes.
In case we need it.
Let's get that peel out of there. See, this has collected just a ton of juice, which again, depending on how you like your salsa. Okay. So I just want to show you how pretty this is already. It's just chopped tomatoes, red onions, cilantro, I'm so sorry, corn. So all very nice, got plenty of juice in it. And we're just going to bring it to a boil and then let it simmer for a few minutes, make sure everything is hot. So can I just...
What I need to do?
Well, can I have you stir real quick? Okay, thank you. Shirley is the best helper, I gotta say. A couple more things I want to mention to you. There are these lids too. You can't can with these, but I find them to be super handy for, well, first of all, I've gotten to where I use my canning jars for just about all my food storage because they're glass and I don't have to use plastic and they last forever. So if I'm doing, like I might put yogurt or something, I just put the ball lid on it and then, and obviously, or say I only have a partial can of tomatoes. I put the ball lid on it because then I know I didn't can it and just stick it in my refrigerator. So most of these cans, these jars, are pretty standard. The only thing I would advise against is, like if you get on Amazon and buy some super cheap stuff, the threading may be different on the jars. And I did it once during COVID, and my first batch where I used the cans and lids that came with the jars went great. But then when I went to reuse the jars and I put the ball lids in cans, they just kept failing. And I would have my stuff in the water bath and then I'd open it up and all the jelly would be floating around in the water because it's, you know. So there's a bunch of interchangeable ones, all the good brands, Ball, Kerr. There was a new one that just came out that Ace Hardware is carrying, but it's called Pure. And they're all really interchangeable, but be careful. Too cheap may cost you money later if with failed batches. The other thing I wanted to say is that anybody that's been canning for very long has probably had some epic failures. jars that broke in the canning jar, in the canning bath. Like what I just talked about, a lid that came completely loose and you've got your food floating around, jars that break afterwards or whatever. But it is just part of the process, and even experienced canners occasionally have a fail. So, what did we do with the, oh, there they are, right here. I'm just gonna wash this real quick. Oh, perfect, okay. So I'm gonna put my towel here. And where's my clipper? Tongs. Woo! Hi, that's hot. Okay, so here, grabbing down on the glass, and you see how there's a bunch of floating water, but and you see how there's actually a little water separation already, which won't hurt anything.
Okay.
Keep them all nice and straight. And also the last, ooh, that one's got a lot of water. Once you've had them out of the canner for the 12 hours and they're fully cool and all of that, you can always just sort of shake them up if you get a little bit of separation. And so I'm just soaking up the extra water with a paper towel, just because I don't like my lids to have a bunch of water stains on them. So we might hear them ping and we might not. But there are 4 pints of canned tomatoes. The other thing, the last time I was canning here, I noticed that the water was really hard and it just made all my jars cloudy and stuff. And I think hard water can kind of etch your glassware after a while. So I looked into like, what do you do when your water's hard? And it said add some vinegar. So if you've been smelling some vinegar in here, I put a cup of vinegar in each one of my canner things. So anyway, are you still doing good?
I'm waiting for the boil. It's
So
starting
all we're
to
gonna,
go
this one can go
around
on.
the edges.
Okay, perfect. So while she's doing that, I'm gonna show you, again, have to use my church key. So this is what it looks like in the jar. Super juicy. We don't have, you can or do not have to use all the juice. Same thing here, nice and solid. Use my church key. Once I've got one of these labels, I always knew that I canned it too, so. And I'm just gonna use the slotted spoon because I think it's a little too juicy. And again, between all the extension agencies and Ball and Healthy Canning, there are so many different salsa recipes. There's also, like spaghetti sauce recipes, and there's just so much stuff out there. So don't feel like you have to use this corn salsa one. It's just the one that sounded best to me. So see how much leftover liquid I've got in here? But it looks much more salsa consistency now. The thing is that as you're putting this stuff in boiling water, you're cooking it, so you're releasing juices. So even if you started out like when I did raw packed chicken, it seems like you just put chicken in the jar. You can do it without any liquid. But by the end of it, you have liquid in the jar because the chicken is, yeah, exactly. So, would everybody like some chips and salsa? It's kind of, I know it's before 12:30 in the morning, but you want to come and help me?
How long do I cook this?
5 to 10 minutes.
10 minutes?
5. And let's just go 5 so we get, because actually I went slower this time than I did the last time. I don't know how that
And
happened.
you got a sous chef.
I know. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You guys want some too? So, and again, don't forget, basic recipe. You can add whatever you want when you pull this off the shelf and go to entertain with it. Okay, so we got our hot jars. Really boiling away. Let me get little spoons and napkins out. When I was growing up, I learned, like as a teenager, I learned to can tomatoes with my mom and lots of other different things. And, back then we never used a recipe. And so it always seemed like it was this process that was sort of shrouded in mystery, and you had to remember all the steps from time to time. And every time, like if I let a couple of years go by without canning something, I was like, oh, I wonder if I still remember the process. But one of the best things to do now is information is so available, and there's so many resources with safe recipes. Just make a small recipe and teach yourself the steps until you're confident with it. And then when, you can, at any time, you can sometimes, like my friend Doreen and I had a bunch of apricots, and we went all day long canning apricot jam. Just did 30 pounds of apricots.
The timer went off.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So I'm going to get these out. We made a big mess over here, didn't we?
I did.
Okay, so now we're going to repeat a lot the same process. Head space, I believe, is a 1/2 inch for the corn and tomato salsa. The two remaining important facts are head space and processing time.
Bringing this, you gotta something for it to sit on.
Yeah, we could probably use this towel. That's fine. You can leave it right there.
You sure?
Yep.
You're gonna sit
I'll just do it over here. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so we get our jars out, nice and hot, clean. Put them on the towels so that they don't crack against the hard cabinet.
Have to be in the water bath.
I think, are they 20 minutes plus 5 or 15 plus? 15 plus 5, okay.
It's 20.
I'm gonna get this water boiling again so that it's ready to go when we put these jars back in.
I'm gonna run to the restroom. If it does start when you're ready,
Okay, thank you.
hit this screen button.
Okay, perfect,
If it
thank
goes
you.
off, all you gotta do is tap it.
Okay,
It'll
great.
come back
I need my funnel.
on. Up, here it is.
So this time, because we made our recipe in the pan, we're not doing any more mixing in the jar. We're basically just gonna spoon this into the jars. I feel like I need to go back here a little bit. We're gonna spoon this into the jars, but the one thing you wanna do is make sure you kind of evenly distribute I try to get a scoop, a really meaty scoop in each jar. I'm just trying to distribute liquids and solids fairly evenly, so you don't have one salsa that's really more soup. And I think we're looking at 5-pint jars here, so that's what I'm going to go with, but ooh. Second scoop is usually a little more juicy. I've actually got a little bit more than 5 pints here. So normally I would just take any kind of a glass jar, and we can use one of these. We probably just want to clean it. But I'm not going to can this one because it's not going to be a full. This is just going to be the leftover refrigerator stuff. Okay, so using the bottom side of this one needs some more space. Again, we're just making sure that there's no air bubbles left inside, because if there were, then you're gonna pop this into the canner and the air bubbles are gonna come to the top and you'll have too much head space.
You're gonna put it back in this one?
I'm gonna put it back right here, yeah. And we want a 1/2 inch head space. That one looks good. That one needs more. That one looks good. This one needs a way more, so. Looks pretty close, doesn't it? A little more. Okay. So do you want to get me a wet paper towel? Sure. Just the tip of it wet, because we're going to clean off this rim again. Remember, we don't want any food to be caught between the rim of the jar. Thank you. Yep. So I'm just wiping. Sometimes in pressure canning, people recommend that you even wipe the top of the jar with vinegar, you know, a vinegar saturated rag, just to get any oil and stuff off, but we're not using oil, so that shouldn't be one of our needs. So we'll get our lids going. Oh, there they are. Here they are. You have them all over here, yeah. Okay. Okay, so remember, we're going finger tight. Just as soon as it stops giving, we stop pushing. There we go. Ha! So nice and hot. Okay. Here's a ring. I'm going to need one more ring and lid, Shirley. Your tap, okay. Thank you so much, Shirley, for all your help. Okay, so once again, getting them down here in this nice hot water. Whoo! That's nice and really hot. This little green rack that's in here actually has slots where you can put the jar, so. Okay, and I probably will start the timer on this one because I don't think we're gonna still be in class when this timer goes off, right? We have 20 minutes. So the same thing will apply though. Let me do my timer. The same thing will apply. I'm going to lift them straight up out of the canner. Straight up out of the canner. Just, you know, just softly touch them with a little paper towel to take off that extra moisture if you want it. And, oh, all of, let's see, all of these have become, now did you hear any of them?
No.
I didn't either. When I do jam, it's like the kitchen is singing while they're all pinging, but they all went very quietly, but there's no more little hump in the middle, so everything canned appropriately. Another thing that I will tell you about, I didn't do it with these, and so far we're still having good luck. But one thing that's not unusual is to have siphoning. So sometimes I think it's just if you're a little bit, got a little bit more liquid in there than you should be or whatever, or it has to do with, but siphoning is when, like, especially with the abrupt temperature changes, where you pull them out of the boiling water and put them into room temperature, and you'll just see like around the jar, it'll just dribble, and your food product liquid will come out of it, and you'll have tomato juice around your cans. That happens to me a lot when I do raw packed tomatoes. But one of the ways, and it doesn't hurt the food. It also, sometimes you'll notice that, especially if you've had some siphoning, you'll notice that maybe your liquid level will be down lower than even the food level by a little bit. But as long as you followed all the appropriate canning procedures and it just siphoned, that food is still safe. Sometimes the food on top will get a little bit darker because it's no longer covered in liquid, but it's still safe. So the way to avoid that, which I now do almost every time that I do raw packed tomatoes, is turn your boiling water off. You can take your lid off, but just turn the water off and let them sit another 5 minutes in there. And then that just helps kind of bring the temperature down a little bit so that when you pull them out, they don't siphon. So I have not had very much siphoning at all with jams and jellies, but I have had it with tomato products. So anyway, so I think, do we have any questions? Comments? Okay, so that's it.
Thank you all very much.
Hi, I'm Katie Platten, and this is a Prairieland Market community education class. Thanks for watching.